And welcome everybody to another great episode of Cup of Joel. And I do believe we are at number 7 this time. So, round of applause for me, a week of episodes in a sense. Granted, it took me more than a week to produce them all, but still. I hope everyone is having a great day, great week, great month in general. Sorry that I've been a bit slow. I used to do two a week. Now I'm doing 1 a week, but I'm not slowing down completely. It's just that I've been working on trying to make a video version of the podcast. I'm trying to find an interesting balance, because I understand that podcasts are audio. So, and I don't really want to show my face too much on a podcast, just because there's a part of the intimacy that I get by not having to be self-conscious about my visual, at least for now, I feel. If I have a guest with me, that'll probably change to an extent, because I feel like at that point I'll probably be synced enough in a conversation to not keep in mind the fact that I'm filmed. But anyway, so yeah, I'm working a lot on trying to get good visual quality and building up some interesting stuff for the future, so you can stay tuned for that. So, what are we talking about today? Well, I gotta tell you, the topic I'm choosing was not easy, because I've been bouncing around on multiple topics this week. I've been thinking a lot about a lot of stuff, and mainly every time I've been trying to make an episode, I always get like halfway, and then another topic basically like takes me, and then I don't want to finish the first one. And so, but I guess right now what I want to talk about is snobism or elitism and also in regards to hypocrisy, especially hypocrisy. Like, I don't know what's happening to me, but I'm bugged. There's something that has been like bringing me towards the subject, and yet I seem to be having a lot of difficulty explaining what is bothering me with this particular topic. There's something very mysterious, and so I'm really hoping that during this podcast I can figure out what is bothering me. I mean, just to be completely honest with you guys, I have repeated this topic multiple times, and I have not found the right words. There's something in elitism and hypocrisy that I'm bugged on, that I just want to understand, and I hope that you guys find my explanation on this fascinating. Okay, so let's pick a topic to where to start. Let's start with the way... Okay, actually, no, I'll go with a personal example. So, recently, my boss was giving me a little more shit than usual. I don't blame him. I mean, tough times these days, and sometimes I'm a little lazier than I should be. Anyway, and he was giving me shit, and I remember that at some point I was getting annoyed of how much he was like, on my back, and I started criticizing him. And it's funny because I didn't have much to say except for the fact that he was a hypocrite, right? That was my big thing. I said he's a hypocrite. Now, hypocrisy is it's a sin, not religiously speaking, more so, it's a bad thing. But it's like, hypocrisy is there's an artist in French, he's called Molière. Anyway, he wrote something nice in one of his plays. It's like, hypocrisy is like the noble sin, right? So it's like the elites, or anyone that has hypocrisy. It's like it's bad, but it's like the goodest bad, because in a sense everyone's a hypocrite, right? And what's fascinating with that is sort of like that the elite, in a sense, are like everyone else but they're also like the people look at the elite, and then they will criticize them on their hypocrisy as they criticize the world, right? So a good example will be like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos criticizes the environment. I don't know if he has, but I'm just giving an example. Let's say Jeff Bezos criticizes the environment, and then afterwards people look at how he does his company, and they go, well, Jeff Bezos, you're pretty much of a hypocrite, right? But that's interesting, isn't it? That in a sense, the thing we're criticizing is the fact that he's a hypocrite. I mean, we are as well. The only difference is that we don't have his power, right? So when he's criticizing, we can look at how he uses power, and then in our heads we go, well, I would have done it differently, right? Or at least if I would have done what he did, I wouldn't have criticized the environment. Which is interesting, because then I I know some people would criticize, well, why does he not defend the environment, right? So in a sense, you can almost say that, yes, the elites have this hypocrisy, but that in a sense, we are elitist when we look at the people above us, right? We think that if we were in that position of power, we would do better. And I mean, sometimes we don't. I'm sure some jobs, like, the guy's so good at it that you go, all right. Like, no one, I don't think a lot of people think they could be like Elon Musk, It would be very hard to be Elon Musk. But in general, if the person criticizes something and has this hypocrisy side, there's always this sort of weird moral position where we go, I could have done better, right? And it's fascinating to me just because, well, we're all human, right? I mean, I'm human, you're human, and we are all hypocrites at some point. And yet, what bothers us so much about the people in power? I think to an extent it's a symbolic thing. I think it's sort of like the people that we give our money to and our power to, we expect them to be better. Why? Well, I think it's sort of like, it's weird, right? Because if we think about what we would do being rich, right? Like, let's say me. I'll take myself for an example, okay? Or like some of my friends when I talk to them. One of the things I would do if I was rich is probably find a way to make sure I remain rich to an extent, right? Then I would probably give some money away, right? Not all my money. I mean, I'm a weird comparison because I really don't like, if I was very rich, I probably wouldn't have a very massive lifestyle because I'm not a big I'd live comfortably, but I don't personally. I'd not want a big house, big mansion, big car. But my point being that I would still take the money, right? And my investment would be, okay, make sure that I'm rich now, make sure that I'm rich later, and then also give some money to help other people after the fact, right? I don't go immediately, let me give the money. Now, some people do, and, I own the fact that I do that. That's my thought process. I wish to an extent that I would not be so egotistical, but to be honest, right now, I don't think a lot about donating to things, and I don't know a lot of my friends that do that either. That's not a justification for me. I'm just saying that in general, I don't think a lot about, going to a charity and stuff like that. Maybe I should. That's totally fine. But okay, so yeah, if you ask yourself the first question, what would I do if I'm rich? And then afterwards, in a sense, we're not that better. When we're on the bottom, it's very rare that we have this position of perfect morality, or at least this is what I found fascinating. If we do have this position of, oh, I would help the poor, or I would do this and this and this, it's very disingenuous. Like, everyone knows the kind of story of like everyone thought he was gonna be the hero, then he was in power and he was corrupt. And of course, because in a sense, okay, I'll give you an example from my past. When I used to believe in God, profusely, when I really believed in him, I remember that I would I would brag to God of how moral I was. It was weird. It's not that I was trying to convince him I'm a good guy, but my point was, if I had, because I always wanted superpowers, but I felt like the only person that could give me superpowers was God. So I was like trying to convince him that if I was given superpowers, I would do good things with it, right? So I'd be like, I wouldn't kill anybody. I would go out and help. I wouldn't, I would do this and this and this. But it was funny because first of all, I was having a conversation with God, assuming that I could trick him, right? But further than that, is as if I knew that wasn't true, right? It was like I was trying to convince him so he could give me a power, right? And in a sense, I was trying. Well, I can't bring God down, but now let's look back at the rich people. If in a sense I say, if I was in position of power, I would do this, 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 and also this person sucks because of this, 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 then I'm essentially trying to place myself to get that position of power. But I'm not saying that that in reality, I would be that great, I mean, if you think about like revolutions, for example, almost every time there's a revolution, the new leader is almost as bad or even worse than the first one. Right? If you think about like, I think my favorite example of this is sort of like the French Revolution. Like, I don't know if you guys know the history of the French Revolution, but it's like, bro, so the new people in power cut so many heads that they had to make a revolution on them. and then afterwards they cut the new revolutionaries cut their heads, and then they were as bad, if not worse, and then there was another revolution. So there was like a triple revolution for this stuff. So yeah, it's sort of like they all, boasted that, oh, we're the next thing, we're gonna be good and all that, and then they get into power, and no, they're not. And then, so to me, it's sort of like, it's weird because it's as if hypocrisy and elitism, it lives in all of us, but the only thing that changes is that if we're in position of power, we can see it, and if we're not in position of power, people can't see it. Because, a poor man, like, let's say you see a poor man, like, sitting, on a street and all that, and I'm not trying to criticize a poor man, that's not all, but, like, a homeless man or whatever, he's sitting on a street, and you sit down with him, and he starts talking about how the government has abandoned him, and, how we all need to reunite together and all that. And, I'm sure he has some good parts of him, and I'm sure maybe, there are some poor people that are incredibly generous. I'm not saying that, but I'm just questioning the fact that, he criticizes the world like that, and most people don't. Most people go, oh, you elitist. No, they listen to him, and they say, yeah, life sucks. But then, if the rich man says it, then people go, funny to him to say it, you do this, you do this, you do this. So my point being that, sort of sense, it is not so much that he is more of a hypocrite, more so that he has the capacity to be a hypocrite. So I think that's also part of what Maillard was talking about when he says it's a noble sin, because it's as if they have the capacity to be a hypocrite, right? But in a sense, we're all elites, right? So what does it mean in a sense to be an elite, right? Well, first of all, when I say that we're all elites, that was a turn of phrase. Again, I'm just trying to explore a topic here. But what I mean is we all, some people, accept all ways of life, of course. But to an extent, we live in our heads. And we think that the way we live our lives is maybe not for everyone, but there's some principles that are, in a sense, should be universal, right? Or at the very least, that there's a benefit to our position. And see, I'm really trying to think this through, because I don't want to mess this up. There's something really fascinating here. Like, there's a nugget somewhere, and I'm trying to get it. So I know if I ever, like, weirdly change topic, I'm sorry. It's just there's something really interesting. Okay, so because it's not, I'm not trying to generalize. There's something, this is hard. All right, let's think about this. In elitism, right, the question you could start asking is, if the poor man can be an elite, and the rich man can be an elite, but we see one and the other, but we know that not everyone is an elite, and also you could also ask if being an elite is problematic. Now, I would say, first of all, that a thing that you can put it, like, what makes an elite, to an extent, is intertwined with hypocrisy, so much as is we will criticize on the world and not do anything about it, or not do enough about it, right? So essentially that, let's say you curse the environment, but you do not put enough work in it, there's an elitism. But also, okay, so actually, now I'm thinking about it, let's look at the grandest example of elitism and explore that one. Let's examine that. So when I think about elitism, there's two main scenarios I look in my head. The first one is a bunch of rich people, right, talking about the poor. And the second one is anything like the Oscars or the Golden Globes or stuff like that, where you hear, like, actors do these speeches about anything and everything, and they sound so elite. So what are they doing exactly? I think the first thing is there's a dingy, they're not being real, right? Because what makes them elite, in a sense, well, like I said, apart from the fact that they don't act as much as they should, I think the second part is as if they almost forget the fact that they're corrupt and evil. I know that sounds weird, but in a sense, I believe everyone, to an extent, is corrupt and evil. We're not intrinsically completely evil. I'm not saying that everyone's a demon. I'm just saying we all have the capacity for it. And when this elitism comes in, is as if almost we forget this phenomenon, at least for ourselves or for others. So, for example, they'll go, I cannot believe that X, Y, and Z would do this, right? I cannot believe, look at them just like doing this. I would never do this. Well, hold on. You're human. You would do it. And as we talked about before, there's elitism in the people on the bottom and people on top, right? When we talked about the poor man, the problem was the poor man just couldn't do it. But if he was in the position, or, if I was in the position, I probably would do the same thing as the rich man is doing. So I was, in a sense, acting like an elite, right? As if I was better than them, because that person got succumb with their negative demons or their evils, whatever, but I would not succumb, right? Because I am better. I am elite in that sense, right? And the people that are on the top looking at the bottom are separating themselves from the people on the bottom, right? They go, oh, I am this grand thing, right? I think the thing that's a little more noxious with the people on top is that they have this wealth that is backed up by us. It is us that made them in the position. I mean, they created a product, but to an extent, elites always have this, and also there's a lot of corruption on top. So it's, when they pretend as if evil doesn't exist, when a lot of times it's actually the place where most evil exists, right? So because they had the capacity to do those horrible things. I mean, just think about Hollywood. Hollywood is incredibly corrupt. I think it's not a big surprise, I mean, just think about the fact that consumption of drugs, people just joke about it, over there, right? The drugs that are illegal, they just joke about how they take cocaine sometimes and stuff like that. It's like, okay, they're very corrupt in a sense. Now, we don't have the same capacity, but in a sense, like I said, the thing that's so annoying about an elite is that they pretend as if they're not the same as us, right? And you can kind of see in commentary channels where if they're genuine, they tend to keep in mind the fact that they're not perfect and that they probably would do the same. Of course, most of the time they'll still go but this is still bad. And, my problem in all this is sort of it goes with the topic we talked about recently about this sort of theater, right? This theater of society, where why are we pretending this grand thing, right? Why does elites have to play this game with each other, and why are we trying to convincing ourselves that we're better is weird, because in a sense it's as if we all knew to an extent that others are not being genuine, and yet we play this game. And I think, now that I think about it, the answer goes two ways. The first way is that we think that we're smarter than other people, because in playing this sort of game, right? Okay, imagine two rich people bragging to each other, right? Both people think they're tricking the other guy, right? Or maybe they're tricking themselves too, but what I mean is oh, I did this and this and this, and this person, look at them, blah, 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 and then the other guy goes, oh, yes, I agree, I'm also a great person, and here's all the great things I did, and here's what I condemn, and all that. It's they both know they're not perfect, right? They both understand that, of course, but they, for some reason, they have to convince the other guy. So, do they believe that the other guy's a moron? Or at the very least that they're smarter? It's weird. Again, like I said, I'm trying to figure out what's bothering me so much about this. There's something so fascinating in the fact that it's as if we knew this, that we're kind of bullshitting all each other, and yet we're still playing this game, believing that we can trick them, which makes us kind of moronic in a sense, right? We're kind of like morons. Actually, now I think about it, it's almost like a comedic bit, right? You ever seen this in comedies? When they make these rich people exaggerated, right? With their wine, whatever, and then there's always something random, like an explosion, or someone naked falls in, and everyone goes, oh my god, oh lord, and there's a woman that faints and all that. What's interesting in that is sort of the surprise of the elite is to me, I always found it cringy, but I also found I find the humor in the fact that yes, it's weird, right? And yes, it's unusual. But to me, it's almost like what scares them is sort of how reality just fell from their theater play. It actually reminds me of theater again. I know I keep talking about freaking art, but I always find that's where I find a lot of my knowledge. if someone would walk in the stage while I was doing a play, I would certainly freeze and have a lot of difficulty acting out, right? Especially if they're not an actor themselves or a prop or something like that. If there were like just a random dude coming in, like if there was a random naked guy coming in, I don't know, eat a banana, so like I would probably freeze myself and go, and have this really big issue. But the truth is that what bothers me, other than the fact that it's unusual, is that I suppose it kind of reveals what's actually happening, right? In a real play, a real person coming in doing something reveals the fact that it's a play, right? That would be like if someone in a movie as well, if someone actually walked in front of the screen, right? A real person, they would remind you that this is a movie. Now, it's a movie, but you still play the game. And so the elitism is this weird play, and that in the comedy it would be like a revelation that actually, oh wow, that's actually, I didn't think of that, but yeah, in a sense it's the revelation that we all know this is not real, right? But why does that bother us? Again, the thing I'm trying to understand is, what is the goal, and why are we incapable of sort of breaking this? It's as if, even if I know this, right, I still feel like if I went in a big public scene, I would still act like an elite. It's very rare the person that does well, or at least I would still act up, right? Very rare the person that is 100% authentic everywhere, right? Unless their authenticity is either just great, like Mr. Rogers, which was just a nice guy everywhere, so he could just be him, or he really like doesn't care. I think to an extent it probably has to do with power to an extent, because when we talked about the mask thing with social mask, one of the things I brought up was the fact that I believe that we wear masks to protect ourselves. Now, when we're elite, we're much more powerful in a sense of what we can do, and so we have to protect ourselves more, right? I mean, just think about, let's say someone dislikes you, right? They could pay someone to investigate your stuff. They can publish your thing easier, and they could, break you open. So, yeah, that actually makes sense. So yeah, I guess to an extent, the elitism comes with the power. But then, why did I? Okay, so that makes sense. And then I guess if they're condemning, okay, I think I got it. Okay, here's my idea. I think, to an extent, that the reason it annoys us that people are elitists, like I said, they talk between themselves of how great they are to sort of protect each other. Like, oh, I wouldn't hurt you. I'm on your side. I think exactly the same way as you. This is all the great things to prove that I did this X, Y, and Z. And they don't talk about the hypocrisy because everyone's a hypocrite and everyone could destroy each and every one if they actually tried. So they're all playing this game, unless there's a big power difference. So they have these big, balls or whatever. Like, for example, even the coming actress with the internet still has power. So there's this big elitism. And then, when they condemn the bourgeois, or like the normal person, if you will, the thing that annoys us is that, in a sense, they forget that we're powerful as well. It's two-sided. It hurts us because, in a sense, we are not powerful in the same way that they are, right? There is an actual distinction that annoys you. I mean, you could still be bitter about something that is true, right? Like, for example, if you get an F and it's totally your fault, you can still be mad about it, You can even condemn the teacher, even though it's not the teacher's fault. But there's that. And the second thing, again, as we talked about before, was that, in a sense, we gave them a lot of their power. So the fact that they condemn us as being powerless is weird, since we are the thing that had the power to be able to give them that power. And the third thing is to, in a sense, because they underestimate us and also pretend as if they were unbreakable. So what I mean by that, so let's say, again, a perfect actress, right, criticizes the world for how it treats the environment, women, blah blah blah, and then we go, okay, you attacked us, let me attack you to remind you that you are not as powerful as you think you are, right? So then we'll call in hypocrisy. right? And hypocrisy, I would think, is the noble weapon in the sense as it can either be a small dagger, right, being like a warning sign. Like if you can show someone their hypocrisy, it's in a sense saying, hey, you're not as good as you think you are, and I'm stronger than you think you are, right? Because I can spot you, right? So I can break your mask. I am, in a sense, the guy who walks in reminding you of the reality. So hypocrisy, in a sense, is the weapon here. But more than that, hypocrisy can also be as strong a weapon as you want, right? Because it's sort of like it starts whatever. Okay, so let's say, for example, someone annoys you, right? Like the rich, they keep criticizing you, blah, blah, blah. And then people are getting really annoyed. So they start with hypocrisy. They go, okay, this guy's a hypocrite. So clearly he's not that great a guy. Let's go check what else he's done, right? And then the thing that's beautiful is they'll find things that are wrong with him. And then because they're elitist, they'll find speeches, right? And so what does, it's sort of like the hypocrisy is sort of like the first attack and the finisher, because they'll go, okay, you started off doing this, and then it was already naturally clear that you're a hypocrite, so that's bad. But then look at all the horrible shit you've done, right? And look at the speech you say at the same time, right? So in a sense, it's sort of like I said, it's sort of like the finisher. It goes, you are in a sense corrupt right to the spine, because how could you not know that you were doing this, and yet here you are. So that's fascinating to an extent. So elitism is a way to protect yourself, but also, if you do it, if you go too far, it's, in a sense, this shield goes against you, which actually I don't think I talked about a lot in terms of when I talked about the mask in society, where there is an actual consequence on wearing your mask too much. Well, I said at the time that it was because you don't have a connection, but more than that, you also, the thing about a mask is that it's just that. It's a mask. It's a shield to an extent, but as long as the other person plays your game. If you annoy the actual person, right, if you get under their mask and you poke them in the eye, they're gonna, like, this is a great thing. Okay, imagine you, again, let's go back in theater in a metaphorical sense. Imagine I was doing a theater play, and a person is supposed to fake punch me, right? And they real punch me. Well, guess what? I will stop playing the play, right, and tell you, what the hell are you doing, right? Like, especially if they were hitting me, I don't know, let's say they have a knife, and they have a real knife. I'm not going to care that people are watching. I'm going to stop everything, unless I'm really dedicated, but anyway, I'm going to stop everything and be, what are you doing, right? I will break the dimension that is the play. And so in a sense, elitism has this weird paradox, and I think with the internet, which is really fascinating, is that that hypocrisy and all the moves in elitism is sort of like in this weird stage where everyone cannot live in this as high regard, because in the past, with like in the rich time, like Renaissance, if you will, there was some rich people that were really rich, and there were the poor. And as much as they were powerful, they were only powerful if they all moved together, and they really didn't have time for that, because like they were barely surviving most of the time, right? So in a sense, the elitism was true and necessary. Like, everyone really had to play along to an extent, right? So for example, if you met the king, you had to be this elitism, 100% big mask. Why? Because you could not hurt the king at all, or at least to an extent, right? When you're in face of the king, you just play that game, kind of like today talking to your boss and you want to keep your job. Depending on the power of your boss and your feeling of necessity towards him, you're going to wear a bigger or less big mask. And in the past, like I said, the problem was that the people, in a sense, didn't have to play that game, right? And they could criticize the elite as much as they want, because to an extent they knew they weren't going to get there, right? It's not like they thought they were going to be the king. So complaining was really just like, it was almost like a fun game. In fact, if you look at, again, I'm an artist to an extent, so I know a lot of the art history because I had to learn about it. But if you look at what they were producing in theater plays and all that, it's really fascinating. They were producing a lot of comedies that just basically make fun of the rich, like, constantly. Like, it's not so much that they knew that they didn't have problems, but it's like, well, we're never going to be the rich, so we might as well criticize. And they didn't have to be elite, right? Because well, a bit, but really not that much. Like maybe when you went to church or stuff like that. But in general, you know, I mean, to me, like one of the best examples of not being elite at all is probably going to a bar, right? Like, again, I'm cartoonishly presenting this, but in the scenarios of bars where people don't care and having fun and all that, the sort of party animals, if you will, then we all remove and we kind of let our monsters roam free, and there's no elitism in that. We're just like, no, this is what we are, right? And it's funny because then we can all connect, because it's sort of like, we all know we can be dangerous. We all know, everything is presented, and only the people that are nervous kind of keep their masks on, right? To an extent, only the people that think like, or are just not super intoxicated, I guess, keep them on to an extent. Anyway, but so in the past, like I said, the elite could be as elite as they wanted, or at least to an extent amongst themselves, unless they wanted a more close relationship. But now with the internet, everyone has the internet, guns, anything that makes us equal. It is harder to be an elite to an extent. Everyone sort of wants to be this. It's not that we all want to be equal, but in a sense we all want to be treated equally, right? That's sort of like the goal of society nowadays. And so one of the nemesis of our modern times is the mask, is the elitism. Think about the entire communist movement. It was literally, to an extent, it wasn't so much that we were for the poor, we're just so tired of the goddamn rich, right? And they're sort of bragging about how great they were when they were using the backs of, workers. So in an extent, it was really not about, to an extent we wanted power, but also it was that the elite was really annoying, right? And nowadays, I think we didn't abandon everything in that. We still find the rich annoying. Like, it's very rare that we have a rich man that we just love, I'm sure in fact, some people literally hate people because they're rich. Because they just assume that they did all this sort of bragging and stuff like that. It's very hard to find, and also every time a rich man tries to be genuine, you always still criticize him, because they go, well, you pretend to be this genuine guy, but you're just rich and you're just doing this to try to convince me, right? So we're very untrustworthy on that idea. And I think to an extent that's also why we want to be equal monetarily, because we want to go like, you can't hurt me the same way. But of course, consequences of communism has shown us that it's still the same. Like, you can't. No one's actually gonna spread the money equally. No one's actually gonna do it. And even if they did, it's not gonna work correctly. But today's not about communism. My simple point being that I find it just so fascinating in the sense that today our new problem is the elites, and we try to eliminate to an extent this sort of fake game. We don't like fakeness. We don't like when, for example, companies like YouTube or Google, whatever, pretend to be something else, right? We don't like we don't like sort of like how religion pretends to be this great thing all the time, and then we know that there's controversy. We don't like the fact that the media presents criticizes the world in specific ways, and they have the huge biases, and we try to go like, hey, stop trying to like convince people of things that are not true or all that. We're tired of like, on YouTube, for example, people are tired that some people pretend to be this real moral figure, but they're really just not. Or anyone actually with a lot of power that just like are douchey as well. Which, again, kind of shows us that we're not against civility. No one's against civility, I think. And I think we're just against elitism. We're against, and in a weird way, I think I talked about this before, but douchiness is elitism as well. It's just elitism with an incorporation of being so for example, an elite. There's a comedian that had a good joke. It was sort of like British people are polite racists. I know that sounds weird, but I'm gonna try to get to my point on that quickly. So the point being that sort of like they were polite and their racism was subtle, right? I think that in a sense, the stereotypical elite is they're still evil, they're still assholes, they still do bad shit. They're just subtle about it, right? So you don't realize what they're doing 100% because they have a lot of forms, or they say it in a high tone manner, versus a douche, like the people who are rich with Jake Paul, Logan Paul, pick a topic. They kind of just they're trying to be elite, but they don't have the same articulation or quality of tongue, if you will. And so it just like comes out as, oh, okay, you're just douchey. Anyway, and also they're not they don't care that much. It's like they think they're superior, but they don't act, and they criticize others, of course, not realizing their hypocrisy. So they're like elite. They just don't have the same consciousness of how they look. So it's really just like they're just more douchey and less elegant about their thing. But really, in both cases, we kind of get annoyed. And it's funny, I think, to an extent, some people that look at people that are like douchebags or whatever, we kind of almost like we want to eliminate elites, but we do not want douchebags. So sometimes we'll look at douchebags like, well, at least the elite are a little cleaner, right? So if we're gonna have an asshole, may it be a clean one, I guess. I don't know if I got to my point, but I feel like I feel a little more satisfied about the topic. There's something, like I said, I think the thing that was bugging me so much was I felt like there was elitism everywhere, but I couldn't really explain it, and I was trying to understand what's happening. I think that what's happening is that there's this checking, right? A lot of people are trying to be much more genuine now. If you look on YouTube, people are trying to be more real. And I also think that's probably also why people are trying to be a little more reserved, because being real is very scary. So, I think there's both parts coming on. People want more genuineness because in our society today, it's very hard to know what's real and what's not. And so I think that's also a reason we want to eliminate elitism. We're done with this fakeness. We want to actually know what's going on, because actually going back to the fatigue podcast we talked about, we're getting tired of all this information that's not real. We want real information. And we want real information that we get right now, so then we can, analyze it properly and all that, and not be tired all the time. And so I think these things they're interconnected, and I'm probably gonna talk about this another time as well. There's again, I feel like I got somewhere here, but there's still something to discover in all this. But yeah, so I hope I was clear. I hope it was fascinating. I certainly think there's fascinating, and I still think there's something here about. There's something in elitism that I still don't get. That's still bothering me. It's probably going to be related. I'm probably going to be talking about self-help to an extent in the future, and probably find a bit of what I'm looking for in there. So stay tuned for that as well. But yeah, there's something so. Anyway, I think the topic's fascinating. I'm still working on it. I want to share my thoughts right now on it, and hopefully I'll find a little more progress, and maybe I'll share it on another episode. But we're good. We're at 7 episodes. This was great. As I've said before, I'm planning to do videos with actual video, so I'm quite excited for that. If you guys have any suggestions or comments, please let me know. And if you still enjoy, also let me know. If you don't enjoy, sorry to hear that. I enjoy it, that's why I do it. So yeah, that was a cup of Joel. This was fun. Every time I do this, I always set myself well, because I always want to say signing off, but I always say something right before that makes no sense, and so that doesn't lead me to say signing off. I'm rambling. Anyway, this was Joel signing off. Have a good night, everybody.